All right, so what I did this week was basically the students had Wednesday and Thursday to take a look at what we had talked about, and then yesterday you'd sent this, so I made a copy of it, passed it around, and they all copied it to their machines. We found out 2 or 3 of the people in here didn't have Office, but there is a viewer that you can use, and hopefully you were able to view it after you took a look at that. And what I asked people to do again was to jot down questions they may have and jot down different things they would want to talk to you about. So it's not my goal to sit here and talk. So anybody else who wants to start up, go ahead.
I'll start. For the EBC table at the top, I think some of the fields toward the end can be put into its own table. Maybe you can make a table for the tenants. Maybe a table for the EDC stuff, and then maybe stuff for this one here. Possibly put this one too. Government. What does PFP stand for?
Partners for Progress. They're, so for right now, the EDC has Partners for Progress, is umbrellaed under the EDC. So it's kind of its own organization, its own group of people that, community leaders buy into belonging, but it's housed within the EDC. So it's almost its own separate organization, but it is within the EDC.
So maybe make a table out of that too.
Okay.
I think we've got a lot, you've got a lot of fields there. I think that they could be broken down in probably into several tables. One thing that did happen last week while you were here is Ethan started to come in, and I don't even know where I have it here, but I've got it here someplace. And he did this, where, I can make it real small, but then it's very hard to see. But the idea was he used a database schema tool to go through the stuff that you had, and he just broke it up by table, and he broke it up by field. And one of the things, tell me if I'm speaking out of turn here, was that there seemed to be a lot of redundancy in there. So that would be one of the things that we would be seeking to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
I've updated it.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that what you're talking about is the salutation entered by first, middle, and last name.
Why don't you, if you want, go ahead and make a crude drawing again of what you did yesterday.
Oh, I've already mocked it up.
Oh, okay. All right. Do you have it where, is it in a project or what?
Yeah, let me get flash drive.
What I've asked them to start doing is start taking these ideas that they have and creating very simple prototypes. So they're not functional or anything, but just to show you what different things could potentially look like. And then you could look at it and say, that's not at all what I'm looking for, or yeah, that's a good start, or whatever.
Okay.
Cable, you could just, since you already have the contact information, the salutation would connect all of it, so you could take the
Yeah, I just did it as it was in Access by the forms. That way I could just look at it all at once,
Mhm.
Instead of,
Oh, I know. Each page had the same,
Yeah.
basically the same information on it, but I didn't have a way so that I could
Yeah.
look at the main information and then see everything
well,
else.
for different people to put it in, they have to put
I don't think you put it on here.
Right.
What you put on here was a shortcut to it.
Oh, so.
anytime I see something like
It's all
that that's
the base,
one
so-
K, I'm fairly certain it's not
This
there.
one's a little different, like the blaze face.
So-
I put these in a different,
So under, who knows about sales? But basic sales, right? So that's what this is basically a sales cycle, which has to be in here in some sort of form or fashion. So this was my way of figuring that out. So the day that I met you, I would put that date in and how we met. And then phase two is, it just kind of goes into that whole idea of the notes and knowing and how, this and that. So then, the resources provided, so let's say, all right, I'll use GCL Solar. They are going to be adding 70 employees, right? So they needed to be introduced to the state of Missouri, so they can apply for incentives to do that. So that's what kind of resources we're talking about here. And then impact is, did it create something? Was there, based on my matrices. So when I gave GCL the information for the Missouri State incentives and introduced them to Donna Mantle, they applied for it and received it, and the impact is going to be, I think, $2 million over 5 years. So that's information that we want to make sure that we're maintaining sometimes. And if I could be so bold, if there was some way to be able to attach those documents in here so that I had them all in one place, it would look way better than what
So
my
you don't really
outlook
want them
looks like.
separated, you'd rather have them all in one area.
Yeah, and that's what that is.
So it's almost like a note.
and number of employees by year,
Yes.
just is what it is.
Yeah. Cause that's one of those things, I thought this
Does
was,
that have to do with these
yeah,
phases,
kinda, yeah,
sort of?
sorta.
Yeah.
The solution.
It was on the
focus
same-
flash drive.
It's
But
on
it
the
just-
same because it's
yeah.
What?
The
it's
solution
my
file is on
impact.
the
Yeah,
flash
yeah,
drive
okay.
too.
Didn't show it to me.
Okay.
But what's interesting about that is I had a company, well, hello.
That's my granddaughter.
There was an economic developer in Weldon Spring who kept sending me all of the data for all of his top employers. And all of a sudden I realized that in 3 years, this employer had gone from the top down to the bottom and had lost something like over 500 employees. And I said, do you realize that they're down 500 employees over the past 3 years? And even he had missed it. And he goes, oh my gosh. That's why having that information in there is key. Are they growing or are they shrinking? Because I also have to come up with the top 20 employers of St. Charles County every year.
What's that based on?
You telling me that you have a number. Yeah, so the number one employer in St. Charles County right now is GM with 4,900 people. I need to be able to know that they have 4,900 people, which is up from 4,500 people a year and a half ago.
Did they just lay off people though?
I heard something.
No, I
along
know
those
that, well, the
lines.
guy, when he came back to work, they laid off 11 people.
Oh, which might be the reason why they're back down to 4,500 people. The numbers are starting to add up. But they're pretty cyclical anyway.
I copied it, but unfortunately, when I put it in, instead of putting it in the desktop, I put it right back on where the flash drive you gave me. Which isn't a real smart thing to do, but.
So
that's just taking the forms that you had and kind of condensing them. So I took a lot of the redundant fields throughout the forms and made them static at the top, so those aren't going to change. But you have the nav bar there in the middle, and as you click through that, it'll change the information below it.
Perfect.
I only I had made different forms for the first three. I didn't get through all of them. So
Yeah, that's it. So as soon as you said it was all redundant, yes. So long as I have this information up top, so that I know who it is that I'm dealing with rather than going back. So,
Is there anything else that you want on the top, per se, if that makes sense?
This
that
is-
you want to keep static on the top.
We're going to refer to this as like a master detail form.
okay,
And what's on the top is the master.
okay,
All right, that'll appear on every page. So these will eventually all be their own pages here. Okay, and this will be the same unless you want something changed. But the idea is, and it'll be lined up better. There wasn't a lot of formatting. That'll be fine. But is there anything that's not there that you need there that you'll basically need for every one of these?
yeah, can you go back to his mapping?
Yeah, I can
I'm sorry.
No. I just have to remember where I put it. Let's see. What kind of file is that, Ethan?
it should be an HTML for you.
Yeah. What would be the chances that you can put them side by side? Boy, I am just awful particular. Yes, perfect. Email. I would say that what needs to remain static would be salutation entered by first, middle, last. You have other phone here. Oh, I see that's here.
I would take it that would be like for a work phone, cell phone type
Right,
of
right,
thing.
right. And that's what I'd probably change the other to is to sell, because most people aren't gonna give me their home phone.
Yeah.
Or primary phone, whatever, cause I don't even care what it is. Somewhere, I think that what we're missing on here is what people like to be called. So Bill Chernisky is William Chernisky, but everybody calls him Bill. And so I find that, again, it goes back to that personal sales kind of portion of what you're trying to do, which is not in any of this.
Would you sort of say
Huh?
other name or nickname?
I would say nickname or,
So you need nickname and email added.
I would say nickname and email.
Now, looking down here, because we can move this up, remember, too. Just wanted you to look and make sure there wasn't anything else.
Yeah, because all of this stuff, this, and this, and this, and that, if you wanna go up, none none of that is, it's more important that when I look at this, I know how to contact that person and what to call them. So I would say email and then another name, which is not in any of this.
Yeah.
If I had my druthers about me, I don't know. No, I'm good. I'm good. Let's just start there. I would say, how am I going to get a hold of that person? And usually it's by phone or it's by email.
Here's your checkbox.
I was gonna say, do you want preferred method contact maybe? Like, yeah, like she said, like checkbox or something. Like whether, I mean,
Probably be a radio button.
or yeah,
You know.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, because there's room, you know. This is gonna change, it sounds like, to email, and you could put nickname here, or whatever order you
Right.
wanted. This is, right now, we're just working with headings, so that's no big thing.
Right.
But like you said, the industry could come here, we could have preferred method right here, and you could have phone, email,
And
you know, or
that's
whatever.
kind of what I'm thinking. Like industry on this, I don't know if that's as important up on this part of it as it is to have it under just the company info. Because even as I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know, if I'm looking for somebody, I probably know why I'm looking for them.
You can always click to the tab.
I can always click to the tab if I need something specific. Because actually what I was thinking was, well, no, because then you could have an extra one here, a notes page.
We can, no matter
Right.
how much you wanna expand, we can.
Yeah, I
See-
would say the industry aspect of it, the company, absolutely you have to keep in here. That's an absolute must. But industry, you could put just under company
Okay,
info.
and the other thing too is, okay, so you change that, let's say, to email,
Mm-hmm.
and somewhere in here, let's just say here, you probably wouldn't go there, but nickname. Then this over here too, it's possible to make a notes field right there, so it's on, automatically would be on every page.
And that's what I was kind of thinking. The system that I used before, the front page was like this, and a notes page, so that when I automatically brought it up, I could see what we had put in it. And again, that goes back to the conversation about, you know, the wife died, there's 4 kids, whatever.
Let me ask you
and I
then,
sound very cruel
With
that.
your notes,
Mhm.
do you potentially want different notes for each of these pages, or is it going to be the same set of notes for all pages? Because if it's going to be the same for all pages, it would make sense to put it up here. But if you're going to have it just on some pages, or you wanted different notes on different pages, then they would put it in here.
Just the way you explained it to us, I took it that there were going to be notes for the individual person and then notes for the company.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that's fine. Yeah, then we probably wouldn't put it up here.
And
We'd
that's
put it down here.
exactly right, because that goes back to the conversation that we had where, Evan, right? You're working for Microsoft, but then you go to work for Google. You know, why? Because this may not look right to somebody. Well, wait a minute, I thought that person was working for so and so, and then you can put a quick note in there that just
Right.
says,
So
we know this person from whatever.
So I would say on the 7th.
I'm looking at almost like this,
Would it better be have a
nickname.
note tab, you think?
and then you'd have that up here.
Yeah.
All right. This would change to email. All right. This you don't need. So somewhere in here, like you said, you would have probably something like
But if
preferred
that's-
method or something like that.
If that's static anyways, wouldn't it just make more sense to make notes a tab?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. If we just put like notes as, like right next to
Next to
tenant,
the
let's say.
page.
Yeah.
Put like
Put a thing in here, you mean?
Yeah. Like what
Yeah.
if we just did that, and then that way, all your notes are in the same place for
I had that thought.
that.
Do you have another color?
Yeah.
Oh, here. Okay, you do pink, I'll do green. gonna put it over here. So that you have business
Okay, well,
and
then,
then cell phone.
right, then probably,
We'll probably have to switch it.
that
up.
would go
Right,
here. and
right,
this would go there.
right.
That-
I just wanna
that's
make
no
sure
biggie.
that it's, I just wanna make sure that
Yeah.
it's noted up there. Order right now is
Right.
less important.
Again, this kind of thing could stretch over, and this would be like email, cell, regular phone or whatever, and you just have the radio buttons here, where they could
Yeah.
highlight any one they wanted.
Yep.
Does that look fairly complete for what you'd want on more or less a master? So
Yes.
that would be available, and again, the idea is, now you only have to fill that out once.
Right,
And as you go from page to page, this is not going to change.
right.
This will be so that's the static and that's the transient
Yep.
information in here.
Yep.
That's no big thing. I mean,
Yep.
for now, with what you're doing, it's just,
That's fine. Yep, that's exactly right. And that was actually what I was trying to do. I don't have skills.
well, and it seems like it would make sense too, that would be it. That would be a table right there. And it would be very easy to populate it. You'd be, all that stuff looks like fairly like personal information,
Right. And then, yes. So, can I ask you a question? Cause I get the relationships of the tables, okay? So I just wanna make sure that, if I go to find all of the people that are in Microsoft, right? That whatever table they're in, it's all gonna come up that way, right? Or if I need to do a mail merge and I'm looking for, I don't know, whatever these categories ended up being, it all fits together, right?
Yeah, so, at this point, we don't have the database set up, so it's not, gonna be, like, my explanation might not be exactly the way I'm gonna give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we set it up, or at least in my idea, if anyone else has any other ideas, go ahead and correct me. But we'll have a table for the individual person
Mm-hmm.
with a arbitrary number assigned to the company,
Okay.
and in the company's table, we have those arbitrary numbers along with the company name.
Okay.
If you search for the company name, it'll associate the company name with the arbitrary number and then go back to the person and bring up all the people that are associated with that number.
Okay.
One thing that, and this is a little premature, but that we were talking about yesterday is what we'll need to know is, okay, you've got all this data. Just pretend it's all set up. It's a new database, it's everything. What do you do that you just query? In other words, that you're just looking for information. What do you do where you're constantly changing information? Because there's big differences between those. You want to give somebody, I mean, if you want to just give somebody an interface where contact info, let's say 99.9% of the time, that's just going to be people looking at it. You could add a new contact, but that's what you're going to do most of the time. Then you set it up one way, but you'd said if you're going to be querying it where you're constantly going to be updating information, that's going to be another thing, because when you start to do that, what we're running into is occasionally at least, is problems when you're trying to combine information from a bunch of tables to put it in this format. That's why we want to set it up in a format that's going to be work for you, but work for them and make it as easy for them to work with as possible.
So I would say that putting new in is more the 90% and updating is the 10%. So,
And how much of it is, you just want to know, I want to know everybody who is in the aerospace industry who in St. Louis, in St. Charles County or whatever. How much of the work that you do is like that? And that's what we'll need to do. We'll need to know, and we'll need to know if you're going to do that, you know, what kind of information you're looking for. In other words, is it possible that you'll need to be combining information from some of those tables that are in there? And what is that information?
Okay, so let's talk about that, and we'll do it by tab. There are two things that I feel like we're missing at the EDC. And I know that these are the possibilities for us to be able to do something. First of all, and I know that you don't have, would you pull up that piece of paper?
Should just be.
Yeah, there it is. So if you'd go up, so this whole crony category part, right? I'm going to pull up everybody that's on the loan committee so that I can send them whatever, okay? I just need to have a list of all the executive directors of the Chambers of Commerce in St. Charles County. Where I think we miss the mark in the EDC is, and it's not in here, that's me, is small business development. And so that probably needs to go under I'd almost say that needs to go in this category under small business development. And the reason why I say that is all of our well, not all of our funding, a lot of our funding is predicated on, are we actually helping small businesses, right? And so I should be able to say during this time frame, during these 2 dates, we touched 20 small businesses or small business development, right? So that I can have that number and then present that. That's an automatic
Do you have specific
thing.
criteria for what makes up a small business?
Those are things that I'm going to have to do internally. So what you guys are doing is creating the framework for me to create the protocols. Isn't that exciting? Just when you guys thought, you're doing all the work. No, then I get to go back and create the protocols. So small business development would be, right, Justin talking to, I don't know, we always change the categories, commercial fabrication, or that I am hosting, we just had a meeting for all these veteran small businesses and they attended this event. And so these are some of those types of things that we're missing the mark on, is how and when have we had contact with them? How do I know that this company, and there's nobody in here, so name a company, or that person came to this event and now we want to invite them to an event that's very similar to that. So more of the stuff that we're doing is inputting so that we can have better knowledge of how that person is interacting with us.
So interactions in general.
Interactions in general.
So would that be something you want, like, in the notes section or something? So like, let's say you did a hostess or whatever, you hosted someone and they are wanting to sign up with some hypothetical, and you want to make note of that when you actually go and enter them into the system and everything. Would you want that on like the notes page so you can just like detail out what happened or like interactions with them, and then we make it so that if interactions is filled out at all, then have that like kind of flag you, hey, this has been filled out, this means that something's happened, in terms of SBA or whatever.
And
I don't
that's,
know,
I
what
think,
I'm
where
kinda
the
thinking of, I
crony
don't know.
categories was kind of coming in. So this actually is more like interactions. Why are they talking to us? Why do we have them in the system?
Okay.
Some of this, right, is going to be in other things. So PFP, right? So I know that if you're a PFP board member, you know, you're already listed there, but there are people that are going to interact with us that we may not remember from 2 years from now. Oh, you know, we're getting ready to launch this new small business thing. What does that look like? You know, who do we tell? Oh, well, this person received small business counseling from us. This person received small business, we'll just call it small business development, whatever that looks like in our world, so long as it has one category that I can pull up everybody that's received small business development from us, and then we invite them to whatever that event that is. And I think that it's going to be on us to kind of come up with our top 5, right? Because this is ridiculous.
I almost think that, so correct me if I'm wrong. So, as I was saying with like the interactions and everything, what you're saying is, you're saying you're gonna have to set up protocols, more or less, of what you consider an interaction with that. Is this something where, because we're obviously not going to be able to know what those protocols are,
Right.
and be able to set things up for that. So, as I was saying with like having an interactions thing, would that be something we just put like a text area or something, or like a text box or whatever for notes in the crony category, let's say, for like interactions with them, because then we can make it so that if this box is empty, then there's no interaction with them, so there's no really reason for them to be brought up in terms of like small business associations or association to that. Or are you wanting us to like just put in the notes section like, hey, this person was talked to at this time, kind of thing? I guess I'm under. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. So there's 2 things.
Okay.
So yes and yes is
Okay.
the best way that I can say it right now.
Okay.
I want the option of being able to say that I talked to Dominic. Oh yeah, you thought that I forgot your name already, didn't you? I talked to Dominic, and this was our conversation. He hates the EDC. Please go away. Never contact him again. Whatever that is, and we do have some people that say that, right? But I don't want to take him out of my system yet,
Right.
because maybe that interaction is something I can work on. Or maybe somebody else, you know what I'm saying? You don't really want to take them out of your system.
Yeah.
At the same time, this from here to here
Yeah.
just seems really ridiculous.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these are the questions that we get asked because we are so broad in our mission. That I need to be able to say, Terry, Terry, if her last name is on the St. Peter's County Council, right? Mike Elam is on the St. Charles County Council. I need to be able to pull that information out.
Which that can, I mean, that can be pulled as long as we have the information on who is in there. I mean, obviously, there's going to be some things with that because, I mean, through that category, the Corona category or whatever it is, through that.
I told you I'll come up with another name. I
There's-
just was trying to find something.
So,
Well, you've
Are you
already
saying-
come up with a name, interactions. You know,
Yeah.
it's
so
Okay.
are you going to want us to have like? I guess my question is, with those fields, what are you looking for? Because are you going to want something like where it's a text box, or are you going to want like a
I-
checkbox?
but I-
Checkbox.
but I've got an even more general question
Right. Okay. Like.
regarding that, and that is what I think we need next from you.
Okay.
All right, I think we've got the data,
Mhm.
and I think we can start talking about how to set the data up. But I think what we need next from you is, okay, You go to work. What do? In other words, no. In other words, what I'm saying is based on that, with what you have right now,
Right.
what queries do you need?
Yeah, that's an ask.
And that's what we need. And I mean, even if it's 100 of them, we can't get 100 done. But the point is,
What
if
are
you
my
could,
top 10?
yes, and that would be a good place to start. But that would also help as far as the way we set up the database. And we need that kind of information. Because if you're constantly grabbing information from 4 or 5 tables, we need to know that.
That's number one. If I was gonna start with my top 5, that's it. And
What
my
is BOD again?
board of directors.
Okay.
And notice I said board of directors, the EDC. And this actually gets broke down to full and exact. PFP. Can you crop this? Drop a little bit more. I'm gonna need to go back to her and talk to her about this. I know that when she says affiliation, she just wants to know that they're on the PFP. Entrepreneurship, I think, is a task force. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe you have the BOD, and then you put task force with a radio button, with a drop down category. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Because the task force does not necessarily, the people that are on the task force for the PFP do not necessarily have to belong to the PFP. So the county workforce development executive director sits on the task force for education. All of the superintendents for the high school sit on that, but they actually are not PFP members. And that's where so you have a membership. And then you have the task force that fall underneath them.
So they can be a member without being part of this they can be a member without being part of this task force?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what you're doing. Okay.
most of them belong to a task force.
They don't
That's the
have to
reason
be.
why they're paying $15,000 a year.
And
Right.
then, do you have to be on the task force to belong to any of the other categories within the PFP?
This.
So, yeah, any of those.
So what she had done was, if you look here, the problem that Martha is running into is that the people that are on the PFP are high-level executives, they're C-suite. And all C-suite people have their own administrative assistant that takes care of all their calendars. So what she was trying to do, and the easiest way that they could figure it out, was to have a PFP administrative exec category so that they got included on all the emails. Then there's the however of that, right? Because then this is where she could actually probably use her own database, but because they're associated with the EDC, we have to have it included. This is like its own subcategory. But those would be the top 5. The top 5 queries.
And again, for those,
The rest of these for these two, they were cut off.
Zach, I think the bottom one is associate. And that top one was, which doesn't make any sense, why we would have 2 of them. Or assistant, not associate, assistant. So I would say that they're probably the same thing. Unless,
Is that,
can you bring up the database?
it was, I think it was cut off from there too. That's why.
Can you go over all the way to PFP?
Oh, okay.
Maybe pass up PFP.
I did.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Go back to the beginning now.
There we go.
Right there.
Well, there's Gala.
Okay, so go
Bottom left.
over, stop. Oh, email. Right. So, going back to the way that you have it set up, right, that doesn't need to be its own category. That person is their own person in their own right. Again, going back to this is just the way that they did that. So she would be, so that executive assistant would be their own person, but somehow they would end up being a part of the task force list, and they would know what to do with it. Does that make sense?
Going back to what you said before, you were talking 90%, 10%, et cetera. On these 5, what are you mostly doing? Like, for example, with BOD, is that mostly when you're querying it because you just want information? It's not very often that you're changing.
No.
It's not very often that
Every
you're
year.
adding
Every
new
year,
things.
every
you
year.
could potentially add somebody at any time. I get that.
Right.
But it's more for that.
Right.
Now, is that one of the places? What in here, this is my question, I don't know if it makes sense, but with what you're doing in here right now, where is there a lot of overlap? Or isn't there? Or is it just because this is what you're doing?
No, there's no overlap.
So this is all stuff you do?
This isn't anything I do at all.
Okay, all right.
But, okay, there's a difference between what Christine wants in the world and what Christine has to deliver to the world. How's that? So I need to make sure that whatever I'm working on is going to be so general that we can start there, and so that we can get the buy-in. Once you get to the other stuff, it's easier. The board of directors, that's a query that gets pulled all the time. Information gets changed in that every so often, maybe once a year. elected officials, that just depends upon who's having an election as to whether or not that information is going to change. But even if Mayor Lynn Pagano leaves as mayor, that doesn't necessarily mean that we want to take him out of our system. It just means that we don't have him clicked off as a mayor anymore and have his other information in there. Councils are the same way. 504 loan financing, this is something that once they get put in, it's one radio button, it'll be there for the rest of their lives, right? So when I had put, would you go back to his thing? So when I had gone here to the terms, you know, that's something that it's been changed. We really, all we want to do is make sure that we know that they're a loan customer. So actually, you might be able to just scratch that whole thing off and move that under this category. It's just a radio button, right? They're a loan customer of ours. And my boss is 110% about me and the other SBDC person knowing who our 504s are. That's the reason why I said that query is very important. Small business development goes back under that category of that radial button where you go, they receive small business development counseling from us. Just so that I can make that query that within this time frame to this time frame, we help 20 companies. I can go in and then look at those companies and determine what help was given. I don't need you to put everything all together. I just need to know that I helped 20 companies. But the PFP membership, this stuff right here, is all about making sure that those people are, these change, the executive assistant changes, it changes, I would say, on a yearly basis. So there is going to be somebody is always going to be in this database. But I would say that if I had my top 5, that's what that would be. And that's based off of conversations over the past several months.
Then if we erase this, you've got all this, right?
Yeah.
Because another thing I think that's important to do is to go through every one of these tables, realizing that now the salutation, etc., but the other stuff that's in there, is there anything missing? And looking at them, many of these fields, like for example, you said you don't need fax anymore. No one
Yes.
uses that as an
Actually,
example.
there is one thing that's missing. Oops. I know.
Oh, county, yeah.
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 Well, and we talked about also about putting county into that master form and having it only come up and be viable when the state was set to Missouri. All right.
Yeah.
But also to take a look at, I mean, some of these are just gonna make sense as far as what kind of fields they are. Some of these, I mean, at least me looking at them, I'm looking at some of the ones that are here, for
Right.
example. And,
SCC
Are
is
those-
St. Charles County.
right, but what I'm saying is, with some of those, are they radio buttons? Yes, no?
Yes.
You know, and just because I wanna make sure before they start to develop things, that they don't think the information is in one form, when indeed it's in another form.
I really just need radio buttons. I need a place to click that identifies them for a query later. I don't need any other information.
But I mean, like, looking at these, whoops,
And somebody could be in all of those categories.
Yeah.
Probably not, but you get where I'm going.
yeah.
So it's not a this one or a that one, it's all of these apply.
Okay.
And I mean, like, some of these, owns lease space, wants a county column. Those would be radio buttons also, right?
Right.
You know, what I'm saying is some of them, But I don't wanna make, or have them make any presumptions as far as, you know, and I know some of it'll be in there when you start looking at the data, I get that.
Right.
I was like checkboxes would be almost
Checkbox, whatever it is, so long as.
Well, I mean, again,
On
it's,
some fields.
on some fields, yes, but on something like this, only space, they do, or they don't. There's no gray area. That screams radio button right there,
That's
just
true.
with a yes, no.
Yeah.
But if it's possible, for example, wants a county, and I'm not saying they do, but let's just say it's possible they wanted multiple counties.
Oh, no, I think he,
You know.
didn't you put this in because I had said I want the county category in
It's
here?
just a note.
That's,
Yeah.
that was, so where I
Gotcha,
put that there,
gotcha,
he had put
okay,
that there.
Okay,
Okay.
but like I said, with a lot of these, IDA, what is that?
Industrial development something.
Is
An
that,
IDA
is that a radio button?
Is, yeah.
They are an IDA or they're not, okay.
Right,
They are a 504 loan customer or they're not.
right.
The term wouldn't be,
No, and we can, like I said, we can go ahead and get rid of the term.
okay?
And then we can, and like I said, this is right from ground up, right? So I've already had conversations with our financing department. They're like, that information is not for you to have. Okay then. So terms go away, but it may come back later. But that's will be for another day, another time, and another class. So you can get rid of IDA term. Everything else is basically a radio button, or a checkbox, or a yes or a no, or whatever it is that you want. And then I have a question. Can we get fancy? Can you make it bold? If it's clicked to, so that somebody looking at it can go, bam, those are all the categories that that person is in.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
why not, yeah.
That's not hard to not click on.
Because otherwise you've got, so far I'm looking at 20 different possible radio buttons, right?
Right.
And then it's a matter of going through, well, if you bold them, then it would be easier to just go, oh, I see everything that person's
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, right now we're just working on the bare bones of it.
Yep.
That will probably come further down the line once we're finishing it up and putting all the detail in.
Yep.
So,
I know.
okay.
I'm just throwing it out there before I forget. Because I will forget.
Okay, and everything that you envision in there, is it currently in what you've done in one table or another table? I mean, is every bit of information, other than, you know, you said county, et cetera, there might be a couple fields that you don't have yet, what, of course, those wouldn't be in there.
Would you minimize those, please? And then let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we'll go to the very beginning and start over. Okay, salutation, first name, middle name, last name. Other name is what they're using. Nickname is what we've discussed.
Yeah, and if you want other name, that's no biggie, you know, it's,
That's just a title for a category. Company, title, is title in there twice? No. Title,
It might be. Never mind. I don't know.
industry,
was not previously.
no.
It might be a title at the company.
Right, that's what I want. I need to know what their title is at the company. Industry, address, second address, city. You guys know what second address is, right? The suite numbers. State, zip, phone, other phone, fax. Some people apparently still have them. Emails, tenant copier code, postage code, mailbox. There's two. I see two under the postage, and I have a feeling that this is their account number, and then they have a code that goes into it. So it's a system that all the tenants have access to, and then how we charge them is based off of that. Move in and move out date, yes. EDC, LPO. There was a reason why I had put that in, so I guess let's talk about that real
what they're at probably.
Yeah,
That would be my guess.
and now we're getting ready to have a third one.
So you might need.
So all of them fit under, all of this falls under incubation.
Just like location and stuff. Yeah.
IDA is a yes or a no. IDA term, like I said, we can go ahead and get rid of that. Loan customer is a yes or a no. Audit committee. Yeah, we still need that. That falls under a board of director function. So some of this is board of director function, some of it's not. That's a board of director function. Loan committee, absolutely, it needs to be in there. Regional roundtable, yeah, well. It is the least important for me right now. That one is very important, the ED roundtable. City managers, chambers of commerce. St. Louis RCGA, we can go ahead and get rid of this. I don't need it. Global Trade Task Force, I think that doesn't exist anymore either. EDC staff is the one that we created. Elected officers, that goes into this. St. Charles, so, this is specifically St. Charles County government versus the other elected officials. They can be combined for all I care, however we can get them categorized. EDC member, that's been, that doesn't really,
Feel like a yes or no, probably.
huh?
Isn't that almost like a yes or a no, or?
Well, I don't even think as far as I know, we do not do that right now. Although if I have my druthers about me, we will. But we don't have that right now.
Okay.
So then legislators, and then this is where this whole thing gets crazy. I don't know that I particularly care if they're a Democrat or a Republican. But then again, I don't know why they had it in there to begin with. So in legislators, I mean, this goes back to all of the Missouri elected officials too. And as you saw, they're all in there. And then the same way that you have all of their executive assistants, that's what this is, legislator staff. So like Blaine Lukemeyer, his staff member comes to all of the O'Fallon Chamber of Commerce stuff. But as a general, that's not something I'm going to pull out. I just need to know that in the notes section when I'm looking at her name, right? And that's so the state of Missouri would be elected. DED. See, these categories just get so DED is a Department of Economic Development. That's state of Missouri. I'm not that worried about it. That should be in their title. That should be. If I'm looking for somebody that works for the state of Missouri, and then I pull up everybody that works in Missouri, then it will show me that they work for the Department of Economic Development, right? Government street address, I think that kind of goes into if you're going to send them letters on a state level. It's the least of my concerns. As far as I know, we have never sent anybody anything. EDC Board of Directors, we've talked about that. Board terms is important so that we know who needs to be elected and when they need to be elected. PFP, we've already talked about. And PFP is the least of, that is gonna be hashed over and rehashed on my level, not yours, so that's the least of my concerns right now. So I would start off with, cause we don't do the gala anymore. That doesn't exist anymore. Then What's Up St. Chuck, everybody know about What's Up St. Chuck? Y'all wanna know what's going on in St. Charles? Go to the website, www.whatsupstchuck. Annual report doesn't matter anymore. Christmas card, that was just something that I had come up with. Go ahead and knock that off. We've already talked about all the phases. And then this was my answer to the notes section. Did that help my cause or hurt my cause?
Just get those, yeah. Any information just wants to. So.
And this is all your information that you sent us?
Yeah, so I think everybody's got a copy of this.
I meant the actual like customers or members themselves.
Yeah. All that information that you guys have in there, so if you go over and look at the database and look at the first names and the last names and whatever. This is our database, and I think there's 2,400 records in here. And nobody's been keeping it updated. And you're gonna probably notice that there's gonna be some, I'm hoping isn't duplicates, but there very well could